Good evening, everyone. Gordon Causey coming to you live and unscripted with Candy the Wonder Pup, who finally came in from the backyard. And I see that Danny Copeman's already here. If you're new to the channel, welcome. This is the way I start all the time, or 99% of the time. Candy jumps all over me because I have trained her and she has trained me. She gets a treat at the start of every video. And oh, here it is. I already put it down. Okay, get out. So I make her jump through some hoops, shake a paw, lay down, speak. Give me a good one. Speak. All right, come on up. And you get to see Candy the Wonder Pup. Anyone who's curious, she is a cross between a border collie and an Aussie shepherd. And she's hardly a puppy now. She's 4.5 years old, 4.5 plus. We got her in all the way back on March 18th of 2020, just when lockdowns have started. And that seems a good way to start, given that the content I'm going to be focusing in on. Today, it is the 24th. It is Tuesday, the 24th of September, 2024. And I woke up this morning, and before heading into work, I did a scan of the news, checked out what was happening in the world, and always have it in the back of my mind. What am I going to talk about if I do a live stream? And the two competing stories were the ongoing situation in Israel, which isn't going anywhere. It is just a slowly building, ramping up. At some point, I expect there to be something of an inflection point where things, a ground invasion, something will happen big. But I mean, right now it's just a steady projection. I see that Danny hadn't, I noticed that Danny hadn't been participating in the live stream. It turns out he had lost his phone and had to buy a new one. So welcome back. Missed you. And I've got a few comments coming in from Danny Copeman. One was to bribe Candy, the Wonder Pup, with extra treats to get her in from the backyard. That wasn't working. There was probably a rabbit in the backyard. She loves rabbits. We have a lot of rabbits out here. And he also remarks that Trudeau was on Colbert last night. Sheesh. I didn't watch it. Trudeau is hard enough for me to listen to. And even Stephen Colbert's days on the old Daily Show with Jon Stewart, he's someone who rubs me the wrong way. To me, he's a shill. He is a total, he's vacuous. I can't believe the man has a talk show. Jon Stewart, while I don't always agree with his politics, he's a good performer. He appears to be very sharp intellectually. Colbert is a lightweight. Is it Stephen Colbert? I think that's the way you pronounce it. I know Americans with French names, they sometimes have trouble. Tina Starry is on. I hope the live stream fills up tonight, because it's going to be an interesting topic, what I want to fixate on, and it's what's happening in British Columbia politics. And to be honest, I don't know. I commented, I got over 8,000 views on the video I did regarding the by-election results in the summary of the election results on election night, when the Bloc Québécois took a seat from the Liberal Party in a Liberal stronghold riding of La Salle, Aymar, Verdun, West Island, Montreal. And in that video, I displayed some of my lack of familiarity with the island of Montreal. But I'll rationalize it by saying, I've never lived in Montreal. I've been there a dozen or so times. I spent time in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, CFLRS, Canadian Forces Leadership and Recruitment School. I spent some time there, and that's in the banlieue, what they call the greater Montreal area. It was like a 20-minute bus ride into Montreal. And I went into Montreal a number of times, but I don't have intimate knowledge of the city of Montreal. But I did live in Quebec City for 3.5 years, 2011 to 2015. But when it comes to BC, British Columbia, I don't know a lot. I do not know a lot about BC. I've never visited the province, never lived in it, obviously, if I've never visited. The closest I came was I spent a year living out in Portland, Oregon, when I was 11, 12. 1977, 1978. I lived in Portland, Oregon. That's as close as I came to British Columbia. And their politics has always confused me, for lack of a better expression. For years, for the longest time, from the when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, the Quebec or British Columbia politics was dominated by a party called the Social Credit Party. I just did some checking to at least be able to speak to this intelligently in terms of what's going on in British Columbia. The Social Credit was the dominating force in British Columbia politics for the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. From 1952 to 1991, they ruled for all but 3 years. There was a brief 3-year period when the NDP took over, but for pretty much 40 years, they were the dominating force in British Columbia politics. And you hear social credit, and so you automatically default to socialist. But actually, the Social Credit Party was conservative, fiscally conservative, social conservative. And, you know, that flies in the face of the way British Columbia tends to be regarded now. British Columbia is seen as the bastion of progressiveness. We've got the safe injection sites. You talk about pride and everything like that. Vancouver is ground zero. I do know that much. And the political landscape in BC is different from in the rest of the country, pretty much, because right now in this election, which is coming up, they're voting on October 19th. It's pretty much a binary choice between the NDP and the Conservative Party. There was past tense of the verb, a Liberal Party, but they suspended their campaign some time ago. The leader of the party was called the BC United Party. They changed the name from the BC Liberal Party to the BC British Columbia United Party. So, and they suspended their campaign, and the Liberals in British Columbia endorsed the Conservatives. So, you know, these labels, even though they were liberal in name, they were the more fiscally, more socially conservative party in that province. It was NDP Social Credit, NDP Liberal. Now it's NDP Conservative. So the conservative-minded vote has coalesced behind different parties. And the only other player that has any reasonable chance of electing a member to a seat in their legislature is the Green Party. They might win 1 or 2, but it's going to be in 99.9% chance it's either going to be a BC Conservative, a Conservative majority government, or an NDP majority government. And according to the polling that I'm looking at, it favors the NDP forming a majority government, but there are only 2 parties. So I'm going to catch up on what's being written. And Danny, with respect to Colbert and Trudeau, he too can't stand either of them. Also happens to like Jon Stewart, and he's congratulating me on hitting 1,000 subscribers. This miserable, pathetic little YouTube channel, just a voice in the wilderness. Seems rather fitting to frame it that way. I've gone over 1,000. I went over 1,000 just last week. And who knows? Maybe I'll get to 1,100 soon. I'm in around 1,050. The number seems to flatline for a while, goes up a little, down a little, up a little, then there are big jumps, and then hovers, and then big jumps. We'll see what happens. Maybe this will garner some interest, because I don't know how many YouTube channels are talking about the election in BC, but I want to focus on one particular thing. Apparently it's a very tight election. I think I haven't been able to come across any polling numbers, but from what I gathered, all the media coverage is saying that it's too close to call. And so that suggests to me that if whatever polling there is being done, they're probably within the margin of error. There's so much to get into when it comes to the political scene. Even though I don't know BC politics intimately, or even I won't even say I know them well, this is one area I'm very comfortable talking about, because I did study political science at university. It was part of my studies. I focused primarily on humanities and political science. So I'm not out of my depth. With that being said, I don't profess to be the end-all, be-all, know-it-all, expert. These are one man's opinions. Gordon Causey, 58 years old, the living embodiment of cancel culture, as I so often like to say. 58 years old, a professing Christian, white, straight, all these things. You're not allowed to talk when you're someone who checks off those demographic boxes. The live chat is busy. And Denny is saying that British Columbia is California light. I think that's a fair comment. And he's telling me not to be too hard on myself. And I'm getting a congrats from Tina Starry. And here we have Danny giving the polling numbers. I don't know where he's getting these from, but it sounds like they look reasonable given the way it's being reported, that the BC NDP is currently polling in around 44%, and the Conservatives are 42%. This is voting intention, with the Greens at 11. And the one thing is, when they do polling like that, what you'll notice is they'll say that they'll give a margin of error plus or minus 4 or 5%, and they'll say 19 times out of 20. So in polling, and also it's science, actually, when they talk about that 19 out of 20, that's 95%. It's an indication of power. And you see that as well in scientific studies. They'll say, and I'm trying to remember the exact terminology, but 90 or 95% PI, I believe it is, positivity indicator. Like 95% of the time, this is going to be right. And Danny is saying that was, the poll was conducted by Leisure, and that was 6 days ago. I think you got the wrong accent. I think it's an accent grave instead of an accent aigu. Just like Leger or Ledger poll, depending on how you want to pronounce it. So in a very tight election, what's going to happen is the political parties engage in something sometimes, not always, but you'll often see wedge politics come into play. And what wedge politics is where you try to find an issue that will both galvanize your supporters and build them up and get them, rah, rah, rah. You want to boost your own supporters. Preach to the choir is another term. And at the same time, wedge away some of the supporters from your rival. And this is called wedge politics. And it looks to me like BC is engaged, the NDP leader, who I don't even know, and he's the premier of the province, and I don't even know the man's name. Emmy, someone write it down for me if they know it, or can check on it. I should have written that down, premier of a large Canadian province. But at any rate, what they've done is the leader of the BC Conservative Party was talking to medical professionals, people who work for the Ministry of Health, doctors, nurses, technicians, all the like. David Eby, or Eby, EBY, weird name, is the premier. Thank you very much, Danny. And show must make you an assistant. You're becoming my fact checker, or my go-to. Thank you. Oh, one thing. I'm going to go off topic for a bit. My brother-in-law told me that when I do my live videos, my mug should be plain and that I shouldn't have any writing on it because it distracts people, and not one to follow direction very well. I decided to go flip side and make it part, and try and have a different mug every show, every live stream. And I don't have that many more to go through, especially ones with writing. I have a lot of plain ones, but this one says, so I'm at the go away level, and then after that comes not yet. And then when I've had, and this would be great for someone working at customer service desk. At any rate, and Danny writes, just here to learn and help. That's what I'm doing. I learned so much from you guys in the chat. You bring up points that you lead me down more rabbit holes, and sometimes it's really good information that I garner from this. So at any rate, the wedge issue that it looks to me like that the NDP is trying to drive is over the fact that this leader, John Rustad, the leader of the BC Conservative Party, was having a Q&A session with members of the BC medical establishment. Again, doctors, nurses, technicians, EMT maybe, who had, BC had one of the harshest COVID restrictions. And it was only very recently that they finally lifted the mandate requiring everyone in the health sector to be up to date on their vaccines. And during his Q&A session with medical staff, some of whom were complied and got the shots, some of whom did not, he admitted that he regretted having gotten and he said, the so-called COVID vaccines, or the so-called vaccines. And he admitted to having had 3 shots. Now, from my own perspective, I'm not surprised by this, because just about everyone I meet, not 100%, but a lot of people I meet who got the COVID jabs, 2, 3, or 4, many regret it. A lot of people regret it. This is not advice. This is not a suggestion. YouTube fact checkers. I'm just relating my own personal experience, which I'm sure is corroborated by just about everyone here. There are plenty of people out there who got the shots who wish they had not. But the coverage on this is that they're trying to portray this John Rustad as anti-vax. He's anti-vaccine. And he didn't say anything about being anti-vaccine. He was speaking about one particular shot. It's like saying that someone who doesn't want to fly on that, what's the model of Boeing airplane, or I think it's a Boeing or Airbus or whatever, one particular airplane is crashing, and you decide you don't want to go on a flight with that airplane that has crashed a number of times. Well, then are you suddenly anti-air travel because you don't want to get onto that one specific plane? I'll give away my age. I mean, the old Ford Pinto was famous for minor collisions. If it got rear-ended, the car had a strong chance, or it could blow up. Ford Pintos had a design flaw of some type that a rear-end collision could result in an explosion. And so if all of a sudden you decided that you didn't want to get into a Ford Pinto, does that mean you're anti-car? And I find this extremely annoying and vexing to hear people who voice concerns specifically about the COVID shots being labeled as anti-vaccine. And I want to speak to this a bit more. I was looking up an old article from the Miami Herald back in 2021, which detailed how the CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, on their website had in 2021 had altered or changed the definition of vaccine. And I'm not an expert. I'm not a virologist, immunologist, vaccinologist. All my medical degrees come from the internet. That is to say, I have none. I do not consider myself completely out of my depth when it comes to talking about science, broadly speaking. I did take science courses at the university level. It was a requirement at York University and most schools. They have something called the breadth requirement because they want to graduate students who are well-rounded, who don't just know accounting or don't just know humanities or psychology or whatever discipline you're following. You needed to have courses. Everyone had to have courses in the humanities. Everyone had to have courses in the sciences. And I took courses in, psychology and ecology to breadth myself, or give myself a wider perspective. And I understand science, broadly speaking, and the definition of vaccine. I'm going to read from the article, but before I do, and this is on the Miami Herald reporting on the CDC changing the definition of what a vaccine is. But before I do, I'm just going to read what's Danny Copeman's filling up the chat. I love it. Mom is 4 deep, okay, so far. Dad got 2, and Bell's palsy. He developed, that is from everything I'm aware, Bell's palsy, which is a form of facial paralysis. Justin Bieber famously had it as well, or has it. And I believe also Joel Embiid, who plays, is a former NBA most valuable player, a center for the Philadelphia 76ers in the NBA. And I believe, I think I'm on solid ground, that Bell's palsy, among countless others, is one of the listed risk factors for the COVID vaccines, said to be incredibly rare, hardly, better chance of getting hit by lightning, whatever. But it is listed as a potential side effect of the vaccine. Danny, like me, has had no COVID vaccines. There are millions of Canadians. They say that 80 or so percent, 80 of the adult population, I think it was 80 to 90% of the Canadian population chose not, and we're lucky enough to be in a situation where we were able to say no and refused the COVID jabs, and that puts the number 4 or 5 million plus. There are 5 or so million Canadians, maybe a bit more, who said no to the COVID vaccines. We're a large number of people. And the way the media tries to portray us is they try to portray us as crackpots who are illiterate, troglodytes, anti-science, and all these pejorative terms, because that's how it works. That's how propaganda rolls. It's the old straw man. You try and take that, if you're trying to push the population in one direction, the way you operate is to take those who oppose the direction that's being imposed on the population, is you try to make them appear stupid, weak, ignorant, and all the negatives. So it's a variance of the old straw man stratagem. You try and make you want to denigrate the point of view, the opinion that you disagree with. Anyway, going to keep reading before I get to the article. Danny, getting back to my comments about the old Ford Pinto blowing up. Apparently, his family had one. I had one. It never got onto the road. It was actually gifted to me in the 80s. I was 16, 17, looking for my first car, and someone gave me a Pinto. um, uh, and Danny Copeman is writing the comment, FYI, the CDC is privately owned. They hold patents on things. I know that. Anyway, let me read the article about, and this again is the Miami Herald. Let me see. And this was written, last updated September 27th, 2021. So put this in context. The vaccines or COVID jabs were authorized for use in December of 2020. And by September of 2021, they were mandated in Ontario. If you wanted to be a participating member of society, if you wanted to be a fully functioning member of society, to use a biblical reference from Revelation 13, if you wanted to buy and sell, you needed to get the jab. You had to roll up your sleeve and comply. And the article reads, social media is calling bluff on the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for modifying its definition of the words vaccine and vaccination on its website. Before the change, the definition for vaccination read, the act of introducing a vaccine into the body to produce immunity to a specific disease. Now, if you look up the meaning of the word immunity, that means you are protected against. You do not get it. I wish I was looking for it before I started this video when I was in the military. I still have my old immunization record, and that's what it was called. It was my immunization record. When you are immune, you do not get the disease. You are immune. Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and the like, they were immune from having for any responsibility for any adverse events resulting from their products. Because, and this was admitted to by Anthony Housefeather, parliamentary secretary under Trudeau's Liberal government, admitted to a parliamentary committee hearing that the Pfizer's, Moderna's, AstraZeneca's, that they were rushing a product through and not doing the normal, oversight and study that would normally take place, that they were being asked to rush a product through, and so they didn't do the testing that they would normally do, and that was putting them at extreme risk. And so that was said in the context of why parliamentarians are not allowed to view the contracts without signing a non-disclosure agreement. If your MP, if your member of parliament wants to see the contract that the government of Canada signed with, say, Pfizer, then first, he or she has to sign a non-disclosure agreement, meaning that after reading it, he can't share that information with anyone. He's got to keep it secret and keep it to himself. And the reason for this is because the vaccines, according to Anthony Housefeather, right on the Our Commons parliamentary website transcript of the committee hearing, they were rushing them through and not doing the testing that they would normally do. So let me get back. Before the change, the definition for vaccination read, the act of introducing a vaccine into the body to produce immunity to a specific disease. Now the word immunity has been switched to protection. Good protection, bad protection, weak protection, strong protection, just protection. And then it says the term vaccine also got a makeover. The CDC's definition changed from a product that stimulates a person's immune system to produce immunity, there's that word again, to a specific disease, to, and now they changed it to this, a preparation that is used to stimulate the body's immune response against diseases, plural. And that's the old versus the new definition. Now they're taking issue with this John Rustad, the NDP, this Ebby or EB, is taking issue with the fact that John Rustad is referring to these as quote unquote so-called vaccines. I would submit that John Rustad is simply using the old definition, the old time-tested and true definition of vaccines providing immunity. We've all had immunizations. That's why vaccinations were alternately called immunizations, because they provided immunity. Was that 100% immunity? Obviously not. Apparently, from what I understand, breakthrough infections have always occurred, but they have been incredibly rare. And testament to that fact is that I know pretty much everyone I know has had the measles, mumps, rubella shot, MMR. It's part of the childhood vaccination schedule. And I do not know a single individual vaccinated against measles, mumps, rubella to have ever gotten measles, mumps, or rubella. Does that mean nobody has ever had a breakthrough infection? No, I imagine there are a very small, infinitesimally small number of people who have had breakthrough infections, but I don't know a single one. Likewise with the polio shots, the polio vaccines. Pretty much everyone I know has had the polio vaccine, including yours truly. And yet I do not know a single person who, after having been immunized, vaccinated against polio, who has gotten polio. Now, flip that around. I go to work every day with people who are supposedly vaccinated against COVID using the old definition. That would be immune. And are breakthrough infections rare? No. For breakthrough infections, I can give names to this. I work with a gentleman, Ross, I won't say his last name, who kept getting COVID over and over again, and he was fully on board. He said, "Oh, my last infection was so bad, I can't wait to get my next shot. I thought I was going to die the last time I got it." How many infections have you had? And that was his second or third infection after having been vaccinated. Similar, a gentleman I used to go to church with. Met him outside of a pizza place here in town. He was outside wearing a mask. I said, "Are you sick?" He said, "Oh, I just got over COVID. Oh, I thought it was going to kill me. Thank goodness I had the vaccine." And then I surprised him when I said, "Oh, yeah, I got COVID back in February." And he goes, "Oh, yeah, it was a killer, wasn't it?" And I said, "No." I said, "It was a 2-day nothing burger under the weather." And he goes, "Oh, the vaccine really worked for you." And I said, "No, I didn't get the vaccine." And his eyebrows just about shot off his head. Because generally speaking, people think they've been programmed to believe that someone who didn't get the vaccine, that they didn't graduate high school, that they live in a trailer park somewhere, all these negative, that's the image they want to portray. And I don't fit the mold. I'm reasonably well-spoken, somewhat articulate, and they're like, "Wait a minute." And the difference is that I take the time to read as much as I can and to get as informed as I can, recognizing that I still don't know everything. There's simply too much out there. I'm going to catch up on what's being written. Danny's writing, "Got no video." I don't know what that. Oh, okay. It's back. So my video shut down for a little bit, or just for him or for everyone. I don't know. Tina Starry is speaking about faith. "Jesus revealed himself to me in the spring of 2017. For those of you, if anyone's watching this station and if you're new, be aware, I profess loudly and proudly and without reservation my faith in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And we talk a lot about faith on this channel. Jesus revealed himself to me in the spring of 2017. The first book he took me to was Revelation of Jesus Christ. I kept asking him when, how. When 2019 came around, I knew what was going on. Remember, though, and it's part of our fallen human condition and our desire to seek that highest seat, and this desire to be in control. COVID, in a lot of ways, was a positive thing in that, and that may surprise people, but we are not in control. We are not. We are the creation. We are not the creator. And I recognize that most individuals coming onto my station will not be familiar with the Bible. I know those who come back again and again are those participating in the live chat. I've got a number of people here, more people online than are chatting. Anyone, if you want to throw up a comment, you're most welcome. I'm going to get down. I see Stanley Delorme has shown up. I want to get down to his comment because I believe Stanley first came onto my station during that show I did on the election in the Montreal riding, the recent by-election last week. Anyway, the first book, I think what happened is a lot of people woke up to the fact that we live under a beastly system. This is a beast-driven system that the world is operating under. Satan is called the prince of this world for a reason. But at the same time, we have to please be aware. And I know you know it. But the king is coming back, and a king is superior to a prince, and Jesus is the king. Anyway, Tina writes, really, the only way to navigate these last days are with him. The only way to navigate any days, I'm not trying to argue with you, Tina. So please don't, we are brothers and sisters in Christ. But the only way to navigate this beastly world with Satan as the prince of it, the only way to navigate this world is with Jesus at any time. Danny's writing, amen, Tina, and Jesus is king. I love that you guys, keep the focus on the king, keep the focus on the throne, keep the focus on the way, the truth, and the life. That is so, you're amazing. And Tina is quoting, I believe it's in Matthew, it might be in Mark, it might be in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Ask and you shall seek. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. God wants everything. God wants your mind, heart, body, soul, strength. He wants all. So does the enemy. The enemy wants it all too. And you'll notice now, if you participate in social media at all, I'm noticing a definite ramp up in the number of messages that are coming across my stream that are denigrating faith, denigrating the Bible, denigrating Jesus Christ. And there is a spirit at work there. There is a spirit at work there. The enemy wants you looking away from that which matters most. Paul Delorme is writing. Stanley is writing, recent virus was 9 months in testing. Polio took 10 years or so to develop. Yeah. And the normal procedure for any pharmaceutical product is first there has to be work, what they call preclinical studies, lab work. It's studied in under the microscope and petri dishes and the like. So the work is done, the lab work is done. If the lab work goes well, a product will then potentially, if things go properly, will move into animal testing. Rats, mice, ferrets. That was something I learned. I didn't know that ferrets were part of things like vaccine development, but apparently they are. Uh, and then after studying the animal, if the animal studies go well, then the first phase is called phase one. Step one, phase one, a safety trial, typically with a small number of individuals. And its primary focus is safety. How well is the product tolerated? Are there any adverse events, adverse reactions? If the safety trial goes well, after it's completed, the results are poured over. And if it has gone well and there are no safety issues raised, then the pharmaceutical company will develop a phase two trial. And they will submit that trial to the FDA, to the EMA, European Medical Authority, Food and Drug Administration in the United States. They'll present their trial design, and the FDA, EMA will meticulously review, and they could either deny, they could approve, or they could make recommendations or mandate that certain changes be made to the phase two trial. The phase two trial is typically referred to as an efficacy trial, and it is meant to determine if the drug or agent actually does what it is designed to do. And quite often there will be different arms within a phase two efficacy trial. They may be looking at different dosage amounts, one at 5 milligrams, one at 10, one at 15. I'm just using vague terms because there are countless pharmaceutical products under development. And to see which dose is the so-called sweet spot, which is where do they get the biggest bang for their buck. And then after that trial is done, they pour over the results. If it's determined that the trial was successful and it met its primary endpoints, well, we'll have one primary endpoint, and then it'll have secondary endpoints. And the big thing is to hit that primary endpoint. Statistically significant reduction in the number of major adverse cardiac events. That may be the primary endpoint, whatever. And then a phase three trial is designed that is geared toward a very large population study. It depends on what disease or condition is being targeted, because there are what are called orphan diseases that only affect a very 1 in 100,000, 1 in 200,000 people, and so it's hard to do a large study. But for something like a vaccine, now you're into tens of thousands of people. And phase three is geared toward showing it's geared toward getting approval for the drug by the EMA, FDA, and then by proxy, Health Canada and all the regulatory agencies around the world. Although most typically follow the EMA, FDA lockstep. If the FDA and EMA approve it, then Health Canada will go through what I consider to be a pre-functionary, okay, yeah, it looks like the FDA did its job. Here's our rubber stamp. That's my opinion, not saying that's a fact. I just have to be careful. Talking about this subject on YouTube is incredibly problematic because I've had so many videos taken down already, and I have a strike against my account currently. And then if the phase three trial is successful, then they make application to the regulatory bodies for the drug to be approved. What happened is in December of 2021, the trials for Pfizer and Moderna, I looked at them. They weren't even completed yet. They still had a year plus to run. But it was such an emergency, so they were granted an emergency use authorization, meaning the studies are complete, so we can't say they're approved, but because COVID is such a deadly disease, and we're going to allow them to be used on the human population while we wait for the studies to complete. And that's about as much as I'm going to say. And that whole process from doing preclinical to the animal studies to phase one, then phase two, then phase three, that's a 10-year process. but they did it as Stanley Paul DeLorme said. They redacted it down to basically 8 or 9 months. They started March, April of 2020, and by early December 2020, they said, okay, emergency use authorization in the United States, interim use authorization in Canada. We call it an interim use authorization. And within the context of the BC election, I see this as by the leader of the Conservative Party of BC, John Rustad, has said he regrets taking the the so-called COVID-19 vaccines. And I think that, my own opinion, that's a fair comment, given that the definition of vaccine changed to take out the word immunity or immunization, or, to render you immune. And now it's viewed as something that you take just to stimulate the immune system, the immune response. Going to read up and then we'll end it for the night. Tina going on. Ariel Sky, I have not seen that name before. Yes, Jesus is King. Jesus is coming to take us home soon. This world is not our home. Danny is writing, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. There are differing translations of the Bible. Remember, if anyone's not a Christian watching this who's unfamiliar with the Bible, and you hear it phrased differently, understand that the New Testament, the Gospels and the epistles, they were all written in Greek, ancient Greek, Koine Greek. And the Old Testament was all written in Hebrew or in Aramaic. There's parts of Daniel are written in Aramaic. And as a result, you can translate different words differently, like vaccine. But the meaning can be the same. Immunization to me only has one definition. Immunization means you don't get the disease. You can say, take this and you do not get sick, or you can say, take this and you are immunized. Mean the same thing. You don't get the disease you're immunized against. Stanley Paul DeLorme is writing, I've never seen God's eyes, but I've looked into the devil's eye and flipped him the bird. God exists. It's written into the fabric of creation. How do we know what hot is? Because what cold is. How do we know joy, elation, euphoria? Because we've known despair. And if you've seen Satan, and we've all experienced the prince of this world, well, the fabric of reality tells us that if you can sense evil, well, then its opposite must also exist. God is real. It's a deep conversation to get into in terms of proving God's existence, because empirically, in a scientific manner, it cannot be proven. Although there are circumstantial evidence proving God's existence, such as the fact that theoretical physicists have now proven that there are dimensions beyond the 4 that we can wrap our human minds around, that there are 10, 20, perhaps limitless dimensions out there. The 3 dimensions that we can tactually and visually perceive are height, width, depth. And so those we can see, and we can quite often touch them. I know the height of this, I know the width of this, I know the length, height, depth. Those are the 3 that we can perceive in that manner. The 4th dimension of time is something we can wrap our heads around intellectually. I wonder if my dog, Candy the Wonder Pup, does she have a concept of time? Is she aware, or does she exist only in the moment? I believe that humans are the only creature, we're the apex of creation, that we're the only creature that can ideate, contemplate, understand this notion of time. And then, so those are the four: height, depth, width, time. Four dimensions. Physics tells us that there are at least 4 or 5 more, and potentially limitless dimensions out there. You can read up on the Hadron Collider, CERN, and what they're discovering about alternative, these other dimensions. Again, too deep for me to get into and beyond my pay grade. Ariel Sky is saying, I got something right. Well, that's always good to hear. And nicely put. I've got to read them as they come up because I don't know what you're referring to, but thank you for the comments regardless. Danny Copeman is referring to something that went on in my era when a child would get chickenpox. Word would spread before the days of the internet or cell phones, and everyone would get the kids together. Let's get it over with. Chickenpox. Now we have this varicella vaccine. Actually, my Army immunization record said not required that I had immunization from a prior infection. Previously infected, no need for a vaccine. And Anthony Fauci was once being interviewed on a Today or some news type current affairs program, and the journalist or the talking head who was speaking to him said that I have a colleague or my wife or somebody recently got the flu. Did they need the flu shot? And Anthony Fauci said, if they indeed were infected by the flu, then there is no need for them to be vaccinated because they have received the best form of vaccination against a virus, and that is prior infection. Why? No need, is what he said then. That changed. COVID was different, we were told. COVID, all that, the previous definition of vaccine changed, and the previous decades-long protocol of prior infection confers immunity, that also went away. Incidentally, February 2022, got my 2-day nothing burger COVID infection. Although I should, I'm honest. I'm candid. I don't want to be accused of misrepresenting anything. I never had a COVID test. I never had no PCR, no nasal colonoscopy, nor did I do a rapid test. The reason I believe it was COVID is I had all the classic symptoms happen on a Friday night in February 2022. Aches, chills, fever. The following day, I had a low-grade headache, a dry, non-productive cough, general muscle aches, joints were achy, sore, typical COVID symptoms. And at that time, February, March 2022, they were reporting, you can check back on this, mainstream press, medical authorities were saying that a common rebound after a COVID infection was for people to develop conjunctivitis, more commonly known as pink eye. And sure enough, after my 2-day nothing burger, within a day or two, I developed pink eye. It started in one eye, lasted a week or so, then it went to the other eye, lasted a week or so, then it went back to the original eye for a few days, and then it went away and it hasn't come back since. So given that I had what they were calling a common rebound effect, I figure, okay, Bob's your uncle, I had COVID. However, since then, haven't been sick once and haven't had COVID. Now, so many of the people I know who did roll up their sleeves multiple times, at least 2, sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6, keep getting it over. I know so many who keep getting it over and over and over again. I see them at work all the time. They're no longer required to isolate at home. And I'll be entirely honest. I'm always honest. or I do my best. I hug them. I say, when they say, when I see someone with a mask, I say, why are you wearing a mask? And they go, I just tested positive for COVID. I say, will you give me a hug? Can I put my arm around you? You want to breathe on me? I don't care. I'm immunized, is the way I look at it. Again, I'm not an expert. I can't say. But I've been exposed to it. I forcefully expose myself to anyone who says they've tested positive. And does that mean I'm immune? So far, I haven't come down with it. Now, is that because I had the virus in February 2022 and now my immune system is robust, strong, and knows how to deal with it? I don't know. I'm not a virologist. I'm not an immunologist. I know that correlation does not prove causation. And I also know that absence of evidence, though, does not necessarily mean evidence of absence. Anyway, I'm going to read up. Danny is writing that we only see 0.005% of the full spectrum. Eternity is a long time, my friends. Eternity is a very long time. Our lives are but a speck. Christians refer to it often as crossing the veil. And when we get to the other side of the veil, man, oh man, I think we're going to realize I'm expecting to be in a wake up mode and to look back on so many of the mistakes that I made over the course of my lifetime, but at the same time, recognizing that because I'm covered by the blood of Jesus's atoning sacrifice on the cross, that I'm reconciled to a perfect and holy God. The reason we call it the veil is because in the temple, in the Jewish temple, and before that in the tabernacle, when the Hebrews were wandering in the desert, they had the Holy of Holies, and they put up a veil. And only the high priest was allowed to go behind the high veil. That was that's where God would reside, would come down, would manifest himself. And you can read up in the Old Testament. And when Jesus was born, when Jesus was crucified, when he said, it is finished, and he breathed his last, there was an earthquake, and the veil in the temple, because the temple was still standing in 33 AD, the veil ripped in two. So that's why Christians refer to the other side of the veil in reference to quote unquote heaven. Ariel Sky is saying, I'm sorry to hear about John Rustad, but he needs to keep telling his story. I agree. I'll bring it back to politics to wrap this up. Who's going to win that election? Probably the NDP, I would guess. I mean, just looking at the polling numbers, there's a lot that has to go on. They talk about, in politics, you'll often hear about ground game and who has the better ground game. What they're referring to when they talk about that is at each riding level, the candidates strive to identify their supporters, and they want to have a large base of volunteers to get the vote out. And what happens is they work the phones and they call all their supporters. Have you gotten to the polls today? Do you need a ride? Do you need a babysitter? Is there something we can do if you haven't voted yet? And then that's called getting out the vote. And the team that's best organized in a tight riding race, that can make the difference, is the ground game. But I'm assuming the NDP and the Conservative Party will both have strong ground games. What's interesting is, should we be disconcerted if the NDP wins again? No, because the Conservatives are polling in and around, according to the numbers that Danny Copeman gave me, somewhere around 43%, which is where the Conservatives are polling nationally. But in BC, it's a binary election. It's the NDP and it's the Conservative. with the Green Party will win maybe 1 or 2 seats, polling 10 or so percent. But nationally, the ballot is a lot busier. The Liberals, Justin Trudeau, was able to form the government despite only getting federally in around 33% of the vote. 67% of Canadians did not vote for a Liberal candidate when they went to the polls in 2021. And yet we have Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister. When has that ever happened before in history? Go back to 1933 Germany, or 1932. I forget when the election was. When Hitler got elected, he only got 33% of the national vote. That's what Trudeau got. I'm not comparing Justin Trudeau to Adolf Hitler. I'm not doing that. I hate Trudeau, but I'm not doing that comparison. I'm just comparing the vote results. And 33%. Is that enough to sit in the Prime Minister's office? It is under our Westminster system, first past the post voting. So if the Conservatives can maintain close to or in around that 43% when the federal election comes along, they will elect a boatload of members, because now it's Liberal, NDP, Green, People's Party of Canada, Conservative. You'll have at least 5 candidates on pretty much every ballot, at least 5 candidates on every ballot in Canada. And so if you can get up in and around 40% of the vote, you're pretty much assured winning. So the BC, or the Conservative Party of Canada, in the upcoming provincial election looks to be poised to elect a boatload of Conservative members. And the Liberals can't even win their strongholds. They can't win in West Island, Montreal. They can't win downtown or Toronto area ridings anymore. Trudeau has and going on to Stephen Colbert is not going to help it. And he didn't help. The NDP is somewhat aligned with the Liberals federally. And I read that they brought up the softwood lumber issue, which has they've just imposed tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber and in the United States. And Trudeau on the show apparently called that a minor issue, nothing, no big deal. And yet that has led to at least two BC lumber mills shutting down, and hundreds, perhaps even 1,000 plus jobs gone because of the imposition of those tariffs. And it just shows you the disconnect Trudeau has with the people of British Columbia. And do you want to continue down this NDP Liberal road? It's up to the voters of BC. And I pray that this John Rustad, I love what he's saying about the COVID vaccines, that he regrets taking them. Hey, and calling them a so-called vaccine. I'm an old dinosaur. I look at my old military immunization record, and that's what it says: immunization, immune. When you're immune to something, you do not get it. When you're immune to prosecution, you cannot be prosecuted. When you're immune from lawsuits like Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca are, that means someone who died, even if it's proven to be a direct result of the jab they took, because, say, a reaction to an ingredient in the product, they can't be sued. Canada and most governments, Western anyway, have set up this compensation fund. So the government, the taxpayer, gets to fund, and Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca, they're immune from having to compensate people damaged by their products. And there have been documented cases of people who have had severe adverse events directly linked to products put out by Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna. Ariel Sky is saying we're going to be blown away in heaven. I feel like, and I've spoken about this before, I feel like I've had a taste of it when I've been in church. And I'm praying, call it meditating, calling it being silent. I think that's the best way to put it, being silent, stilling the mind. And I have felt such incredible, I can't put words to it. It's just a feeling that I don't even exist in of myself. I'm part of something far greater, far bigger, far more wonderful, far more, words escape me. And I'm just relishing in it. It's such a, I think Buddhists call it nirvana. I'm it's a word. It's wonderful. And then as soon as I become aware of it, like a dream, after you first wake up, it just slowly drifts away into the ether. And I feel like I'm being given just a small taste. Ariel's writing with respect to COVID, we fell ill too. Bad, what was the real reason I never did any tests either. Yeah, I think Ariel, you and I and anyone like us, I think we're a very small percentage of the Canadian population who never got the jabs or got tested. And Danny had my symptoms back January, 2-3 days of feeling like, but nothing else. Yeah. People get sick. It happens. And I think a lot, I don't know. I don't, again, my medical degrees don't exist. But I think, there are times where we just get worn down. I've read, there's a guy named David Katz, Dr. David Katz, Yale educated male medical doctor, who was the head of the U.S. Centers for Lifestyle Medicine. And he's been on Fox and ABC, NBC, CBS. He's prominent, not since COVID. He kind of got pushed aside when he wrote an op-ed piece that was published in the New York Times asking if the lockdowns, if the cure was worse than the disease, and that kind of put him on the outs. But according to him, not according to me, but according to 5 key factors which determines a person's health. The first one, you have nothing you can do about it. Your genetics determine your health. And, it's a lottery. But after that, the other 4, you have a degree of control over. One's diet, one's exercise, one's the amount of sleep you get, and the other is the manner in which you deal with stress. And we all have stress in our lives. And that's where faith comes in. God tells us not to worry. God, fear not is in the Bible. The words fear not appear 365 times in the Bible, one for every day of the year. We're not to live in a state of fear. When you hear the news trying to promulgate and trying to foist on you a state of fear, that should be an alarm bell for this isn't news, this is propaganda. If they're trying to trigger an emotional response and get you to be afraid in particular, that's the language of the enemy. The enemy, Satan, wants you afraid. God wants you at peace, because when you're at peace, when you're calm, that's when you think clearly. That's when you see things more clearly. Wow. Danny's writing, largest crowd that he was in during COVID was about 300,000 in March against Madness in Montreal. And it wasn't a super spreader event. I was going out to Henry Hildebrandt's church in Aylmer, Ontario. Went there many times, 7, 8, maybe 10. I went so many times. And we were gathering 700-800. Was the largest groups, and hugging, shaking hands, doing all the things that we weren't supposed to do. And, this was before Anthony Fauci publicly admitted that there was never any science behind social distancing, that there was no science behind it. And then in December of 2021, I went to Canada Christian College in Whitby, where an organization called the Democracy Fund hosted an event that had 700-800 people in attendance in an indoor theater type, the stage. And this group, Democracy Now!, well, I think it was founded by a former professor at Western University who lost her job as a professor of ethics over refusing to get the COVID shots. And so 700-800 people. And I remember there was a funny experience that happened. I'm a smoker. I coughed. I needed to cough. So what I did was I turned and ineffectually lifted my elbow and and found myself, it was a crowd. There was a crowd of people. We were up near it was after the session, the event had ended, and people were up where the speakers were, where there was Julia Panesi, Doug Ford's daughter spoke, Doug Ford's daughter's husband spoke, Henry Hildebrandt spoke. That's who I'd gone to see. And I was able to get into the roped off area because Henry, he can go. And anyway, I coughed on this gentleman, and the two of us looked at each other, and we both broke down laughing, and then we hugged each other. You talk about, now that was 2021, December, and February, I did get the bug, probably 99.9% sure. Can't confirm it by a test, but anyway, just going to read up. I love it when the live chat, you guys are absolutely amazing. I was telling people if it's so bad, bodies would be all over the street. Well, our supply chain would have broken down. The supply chain would have broken down. That's my thought. If at the beginning they said that it was 10 times worse than the flu, that Anthony Fauci announced that this is at least 10 times more serious than seasonal influenza. Okay, well, if that's the case, it's going to tear like crazy through the supply chain. You have factories, you have warehouses, and a lot of people who work in warehouses smoke. Hand to mouth, hand to mouth, hand to mouth. Touch, 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 hand to mouth. Like, disease spreads. I'm not an epidemiologist, which is epidemiology is the study of transmission vectors and how diseases spread. That's what the study of epidemiology is all about. But I don't think you need to be a epidemiologist to realize that micromanaging human behavior in an effort to try and mitigate the spread of a virus, good luck. The supply chain has to stay open unless you want to invite the zombie apocalypse. And if it had been 10 times more deadly than the seasonal flu, the supply chain would have been destroyed. Grocery shelves would have been empty. Everything would have been empty. Gas wouldn't have been being delivered because everyone would be filling up hospitals and everything. We were supposed to be lining up 8 deep to get a bed in ICU. That's how bad things were projected to get at the beginning. And the science told us that, and it never happened. There were no lineups 8 deep for beds in critical care. Ariel writes, Justin thinks he's working for the adversary when everything is in God's hands. Pharaoh thought he was doing his own will. God was hardening Pharaoh's heart. Why was God hardening Pharaoh's heart? Because he wanted to show his might, his power, his glory to both his people and to the Egyptians. It was by God's mighty hand that the Israelites were delivered from bondage in Egypt. It wasn't a kind, soft-hearted Pharaoh who said, yeah, okay, you can leave. No. Danny's saying we must get Justin out of office while we still have some Canada to save. October 2025. If I had, that's my bet. It could happen before, but I doubt it. Ariel, I think, talking about what I had talked about, this sensation I've had while silencing my mind and being in church, has had the same type of experience in dreams, I think. All right. And Danny's writing the beginning of all wisdom. He didn't frame it that way, but it's the only thing I fear is God, and that is the beginning of wisdom, according to, I think that's in Proverbs. Anyway, and Ariel says, yes, I've gone on for over an hour and 15 minutes nearly. Thank you so much for watching. When I do tomorrow nights, Wednesdays and Sundays are the 2 days I want to always do one. If I take a day off and I decide not to do one, I want it to be other days of the week. But Wednesdays and Sundays are the days I always want to go live. And barring something unusual, I said at the beginning when I started this, that when I looked over the news this morning, the two competing things to talk about were the situation in BC and, the news about John Rustad regretting having gotten the COVID so-called vaccines, to quote him, or the war in Israel. That war in Israel, it's going to blow. It is going to blow. I keep saying could be hours, could be days, could be weeks, could be months. We are on that progression. And I don't think I've been wrong in any way, shape, or form. Everything just keeps getting more and more, but it's just a steady progression. We've kind of hit something of an inflection point, but things are going to get worse. And that is my belief. So I'll be talking about the war in Israel and what is coming. I think we're going to see Iran getting involved. And once Iran gets involved, then Russia gets involved. But I think we're going to have to wait until after the November 4 election in the United States, because until then, Ukraine is not going to admit what is already a fact. Ukraine has been defeated by the Russians. Ukraine has lost that war. Russia has won. But the U.S. administration, the current U.S. administration cannot, they're going to keep propping up Zelensky and they're going to keep that war going until after the November 4 election, because that would be devastating for the Biden-Kamala Harris administration, after investing so much political capital in Ukraine, and for them to admit, they lost. I mean, it's as bad as Vietnam, when the U.S. lost the war in Vietnam, the Vietnamese War. So Ariel's writing 40,000 troops are at the border of Israel. Is that Israeli troops, or is that Hezbollah troops, or is that the two combined? It's coming. It's coming. There is going to be a ground war. Hezbollah needs Iran. They need their help. Hezbollah and I bought into it. I thought Hezbollah was a serious force, and so far they appear more to be a paper lion than a real lion. And we all know who the Lion of Judah is, the Lion and the Lamb. So get into relationship with him. If you take nothing else from my video, realize that God uses the weak. God uses the foolish to humble those who think they're wise and strong. And we are going to see that in spades. I'm not putting any dates. Anyway, may the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, even in these challenging times. And may the Lord grant you peace, and he will. Invite him into your heart. Get into relationship with him. Find a faithful community. Help them. Get help from them. Give help to them. We're there for each other. We're to build each other up. And even if you're new in the faith, even if you don't know much about this Jesus guy or this Bible, you're still helping, because it's an encouragement to believers, to those who are, to see others coming in and to see the passion. So often, recent converts can bring so much passion and energy to a congregation. Danny is saying, pray for the sheeple in your life. John 5 has shown up. Great. Tina, thank you. I thought this was a good live stream, one of my better ones. I enjoyed it. I think I'm I had a nap tonight, so that helped. Thank you for the thumbs up. I talk about this often, the fact that I get the little dopamine like everyone does, a little happy drug. If you want to subscribe to the station, you're most welcome. I'm 1,050-ish. Let's see if we can get it to 2,000. Wouldn't that be something? I tend to think as the higher you go, it gets easier, but we'll see if I continue on this pattern. No production value, just one the poster child for cancel culture, injecting his voice into the public discourse and trying to have an impact. So we'll talk to you all tomorrow night when, barring something unusual, we'll be talking about the situation in Israel. Good seeing y'all. Thanks again, everyone. Good night. Anarchy got here late, but says, we'll be blessed all with a friend anyway, so gotta go. No worries, Anarchy. Talk to y'all soon.